Okay. This is D8CX, The Reckoning. I'm Tim Plunkett. I'm a senior developer at ZibTech in Philadelphia. And this is why you need to start working on Drupal 8 from the Contrib side right now. That's the wrong slide. Cool. What? I can't zoom out. Oh, that one was a good, yeah, there we go. Oh, this slide?
I was like, you need to.
Slides with bullets.
Wait, this is what I
I can edit the source and remove it if you want me to.
Oh, come on.
Nice.
What presentation software is
Okay. You did not see that slide. It never existed. There. Is everything on the page? Okay. D7CX. This is what the hell? Cool. Top 40 modules were proposed that they were going to all be ported to Drupal 7 on the day Drupal 7 was released. The tag, it was used on issues and on project nodes, and it was invented by Moshe. And it was a really great idea. All maintainers were encouraged, not just those of the top 40 modules. And you would say on your project page, I pledge, or D7CX, I pledge to have my module ported the day Drupal 7 comes out. And it didn't quite work. There are now 51 of the top 60 were ported, and it's what, 2 years now, almost? So, and they had to bump it from 40 to 60 to make the percentage look better, because there's a couple of the top 10 that just didn't even come close. But you can see this site, and
Is that including things like CCK? Oh.
Yeah.
CCK was moved into core, so it counts. So there's a couple here that, didn't quite make it.
Well, a lot of them are deprecated.
Not all of them. So embedded media field doesn't count as being deprecated because they were going to just say media counted, but Aaron asked that they don't do that until he has a full upgrade path from M field to media, which doesn't exist yet. But Lightbox 2, still in beta. Node words, meta tags is still in alpha, so it doesn't count. Path redirects. The date read has too many modules, is the point. But we did pretty good. Also, I'm really glad earlier Angie's site hadn't run cron and it said 0 out of 0 projects were updated, which is really bad. Thankfully, this is up to date. So for D8CX, we want to have the same thing. When Drupal 8 comes out, we want to have as many modules as possible. But this time, we're not going to promise anything. And therefore, there's going to be no pressure on module maintainers. And now there's no reason not to. So you can start working on it now because there's nothing there. It's an empty promise. So D8CX.org is a site where we're going to be gathering resources for module developers. This is a live site. You can go to it. It's a Drupal 8 site. And there's nothing there right now, obviously. Oh yeah, I used the Contrib Garland theme.
Wow.
Wait, you could have used Blue Marine or something.
I like Garland.
Just before his time.
Yeah, I was, yeah. Well, the other idea, so we'll have resources there and success stories, like highlights, like the community spotlight, but for modules that got ported. And, just like the things that we talk about in the Drupal Contribute IRC room that everyone, if you happen to be there, there's great knowledge going through there, and it's not logged for many reasons, but this would be a nice dumping ground for specifically for the D7 to D8 module Contrib upgrade. When to start porting your module. So we have feature freeze coming up, and then code freeze, and then release. And the question is in which window should you start? It's now is the answer. The reason is, at this point, you can still, if your module needs it, you can still get a feature into Drupal Core. Come December 1st, you're done. There's nothing new is going to be added, and it's only going to be fixes from there on. And more importantly, I know this happened to a couple people before. Like Drupal core has a lot of coverage. A lot of use cases are supported. You have the poll module and the forum module, and they do everything that every site has ever needed. But for everything else, there are a lot of times that a specific API is used or abused in Contrib in a way that the core tests and core mentality doesn't apply. So if you try to port your thing and you said, oh, well, you removed that option for that hook, but I was using it for this really crazy reason, you might have a chance to add it back or work with the API to change the API to make your Contrib module useful. If you don't do that before April 1st, you're out of luck. There's not going to be, excepting critical bugs, there's not going to be any API changes after April 1st. And you don't want to get left out in the cold and find out that your module cannot exist in D8 unless you tell someone to hack core. I know there's several, I can think of a couple D7 modules, like Secure Pages is one, where on the project page it says, this module will not work unless you apply this patch and hack this file. And no one wants that, because either the module doesn't work because you don't read the instructions, or people won't use your module because it's saying in big red letters, go hack core now. The stability of D8. Can I trust it? Code changes every day, or this weekend, every hour. And you have to be prepared to reinstall your site multiple times per day. But thankfully, as a module developer, you have this handy tool called devel generate, and you're not worried about content. So if you were trying to start building a D8 site right now, you probably wouldn't be the best idea, because you'd lose all your data, 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. But as a module developer, it doesn't apply to you. So there's no reason to wait now. Just because you have to hose your entire site, when Angie commits some crazy patch, doesn't mean that you can't start porting.
So why did you build D8CX and D8?
I did. Because there's no content there yet. I can't lose. Everything on that site is in YAML files. So all I have to do is make sure the staging directory doesn't move again.
Well, luckily everyone's just going to have empty promises, so there won't be much to report.
It's a perfect system. Nothing can go wrong. All API changes through the D7 to D8 core process are all documented, or will be. And if you find one that isn't, you can help. This is the Drupal.org change records, change notices page. And it has a complete list of everything that has changed. So not everything, some things are specific to module developers, but this is a really, really, really useful page for how to find what changed. And I'll talk more about that now. First, I'd like to talk about there's a certain module that I and a couple others have spent the last 5 months working on, and it's called Views. We began porting the Views module to Drupal 8 on May 15th, and then we finished porting it on May 15th. It took 2 hours to port Views to D8. That was it. And then we merged it into core October 22nd, and that's because we rewrote a large majority of the code, I'd like to think. But because we ported it so early, there were so little changes to the API back in May that it took 2 hours for me to do it. And that list changes page made it possible. We did it we had 3 sprints with 4 main people and then almost 50 other people helping. And it was 160 days from the day we published the module to the day it got merged in. Keeping up with all the API changes that went through. And it worked. We're in. We're done.
Woo!
So step 1 for how to port your module to D8. Change your version strings to 8.x. Enable your module. See what happens. It took me to, when I was porting to Views, all I did was this. And then I just fixed each fatal error that it handily told me exactly what was wrong until I got the Bardic, and then it was done. It was a series of fatal errors. So change notices is where that came in handy. There are only 200 changes to the API in theory, if they're all documented, which they're not. This is not a canonical list of types of changes. This is just my thinking of it. They're not tagged in any such way. The first one is renamed or replaced functions. So literally, they just made the name better. Like node types get names. It was switched to like node type get label, I think, and or functions were just replaced or merged. And that was the easy part of fatal error, cannot find function. The other one were different function parameters. New ones, or they were removed that Views was using. And the third thing was entirely new systems or approaches to writing a module. So in the D6 module developing guide, it says this is the way we do things, and it was all very focused on content types, because and D7 was very, very focused on fields, and D8 has a completely different focus. I'll get there. So the first error type of change notice is when they can't find the function you want. All you have to do is just type that function name into the list changes search box, and it will tell you where it went, what it's called now, and what's different about it. If it doesn't, or if the document it said, oh, well, if you used to call it this way, now call it this way. Well, if you said, well, no, I used to call it a completely different way, and I was, iterating over the results and using it as a callable, then look for a place in Core or another module that used the function in a similar way to yours, and look then in the D8 copy of the same exact function and see how it was used. And you can kind of see that it wasn't just a straight rename, oh, I need to call this function first, then this one, and then switch them. And then once you finish doing that, go back and edit the change notice and say, well, in addition to this other change, you also, if you were using it this way, this is the new code, and just provide snippets. Don't use any new APIs when porting your module, unless your module is completely broken without them. If you spend all of your time just trying to get the module to not fatal error, the port will go way smoother. And once it starts to function the way you expected it to, round out your test coverage, make sure that everything that you just mentally stepped through and said, okay, when I click here, it does this, that, put that all in simple tests without looking and seeing, oh, what's that new cool API that Drupal 8 is providing. Then use the new APIs. After you have test coverage, you can use one of the many new APIs put into Core. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. One is the plugin system, one is key value storage, and the other one is entity controllers. So annotated plugins. Before, when you had a bit of functionality you wanted to expose to Drupal, you would write an info hook and point Drupal to that. So for example, this is a views plugin. You used to have to invoke hook or implement hook views plugins, generally in your .views.inc file, and make sure that the plugin name was put into your .info file in the files registry. And then all of a sudden, and if it was the first plugin your module needed, you also need to implement hook views API, also in your .views.inc file, unless you wanted to move the file, and then you had to put it, tell it which template key to use to point it at a different file. So that's 4 files that you might need to edit just to add a plugin. Now you need one, the plugin. You have a single file. All the data that used to be in the info hook is directly above the plugin in what is called an annotation, which is just a fancy comment that is parsed by, we're using Doctrine to parse the annotations. So this is identical to the way that you would do a D6 and D7 views plugin, except you only have to edit the one file directly. And dropping in that file and clearing your cache, that plugin will be available to the system. And the important part right here is just this @plugin comment. This tells it that this is now a plugin. And you have keys that cannot have spaces in them, only underscores or the machine names, and an equal sign, and then something that's double quoted. Or if you want to use, if you're used to wrapping it in T, you use @translation. And the last gotcha is that you cannot use trailing commas in plugin arrays. If you do, it will fatal white screen and tell you that you have a comma where it doesn't expect one. Key value store. This is called the CTools Object Cache in D7. And if you've ever edited, who's edited views before? Who's not paying attention? If you've ever edited views and you go and edit it and you don't hit save, all your changes are still there. And if you go and edit it 2 days later, all your changes are still there. And if someone else goes and tries to edit the view, it says, no, someone else is still working on this. 2 days later, up to, 14 days, I think, was when it was cleared on cron. 7 days. Every 7 days it clears cron clears out who was editing what. But who's ever done a node preview, or tried to edit a node, and 2 people edit it at the same time and it clashes. Views never did that, and now this entire API was ripped out and put into Core, and is now wrapped around key value storage called temp store. Everyone can see the snippet in the back? So we did this on one line in views, but I split it out so that it's clear. So you pick a specific view you want to work on, you load it, and then you get the temp store factory to create a new temp store. You get the view-specific one, because we could, in theory, use this for things like node previews or node editing or anything that's workflow-based editing an object. And then we just put the view into the storage, and it's there. And down here, when you get it back, you could get that view back anytime within, I guess, 7 days. A function, another request. If you put like sleep, a big number in there, it'll still be there. And this is really useful. And I can think of a bunch of modules that are, if when porting to D8, they would really want to use this. The temp store, this says key value storage up here, but the code is all referencing temp store. And really, temp store just is the user temp store associates a specific entry in the key value with the user or the session ID. So you can get back specifically who put that view in there, who was the active user when it was saved, so that you can inspect it later. And it can go across session ID too. So if you are edited, for the love of God, don't do it. But give anonymous users the ability to edit views. They could be editing the view, and then when they log in, it still knows that they were the ones editing the view. Entity controllers. These solve most of my hatred with the node module. Because in the node module, every single part of the node system was all built into one giant file with a bunch of procedural functions, or 3 if you count node.pages and node.admin. And now all the different parts of what makes a node are in different classes. So the first one is the actual class you're viewing, which is the entity class itself, which is just a class node, extends entity, implements content entity to indicate that it contains content. The controller controls the storage, and the controller class, I should say. And this happens to use node storage controller, which is extending the database. So nodes are stored in the database. Great. You could, in theory, store all your nodes in YAML files, but don't do that. Render controller class. This is a new one as well. Like node view now calls this instead of manually custom procedural code right in line. You have a complete class that encapsulates all of what it means to view and render a node. And you could override that if you'd like, or extend it. The form controller, well, I'll skip the form controller because that one's cool. I'll come back to that, Translation controller class is about, 12 hours old in terms of being in Core?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was added, and